Hello amazing humans on the net. Today we have a perfect day to talk about books because it is both raining and it is windy as well. And I know it's June, so that's a bit of a surprise, but hey, we're in England, so anything is to be expected. And the books we'll be talking about today are described as written with pitch perfect prose. I love that expression because to me it feels like it's 100% accurate description of this author's non-fiction. The books I'm talking about are the 3 books that are part of the living autobiography by Deborah Levy. Now, all these 3 books are kind of hard to describe because they technically memoirs, but they don't read like your traditional memoir. They are more of these philosophical musings, if you like, on life, on writing, on womanhood. There are lots of memories here for sure, but it never feels like Levy is just trying to document her life. Instead, the few things that she does offer here on her life experiences serve as a kind of a gateway to reflect on all kinds of things that may look personal on the face of it, but are actually quite universal. I first heard of Deborah Levy because one of the other booktubers, and I will link her channel below, she was talking about the cost of living, and it really intrigued me, and I thought, why not read all 3 starting from the beginning, which is the book titled Things I Don't Want to Know. The Cost of Living is the middle book and the final book is The Real Estate. I am so glad that I decided to read all 3 because actually it is the first book in this trilogy that has become my top favorite. So let's start with the first book, Things I Don't Want to Know. And by the way, if you do decide to pick up all 3 books, I highly recommend to get this one in the other version so that it matches these 2. All my 3 books are library copies, so I didn't have a choice, but this one comes in this sort of a blue color, and together they make this really nice looking set. This is quite a short thing to read, but boy oh boy does it pack a punch. On the cover itself, you've got a description that says a response to George Orwell's 1946 essay, Why I Write. Out of pure curiosity, I did read that essay, and again I will link it below for you if you are also interested. And in this essay, Orwell talks about 4 great motives behind writing. Number 1, sheer egoism. Number 2, aesthetic enthusiasm. 3, historical impulse. And finally 4, political purpose. And so Deborah's chapters in this book are actually titled in exactly the same way, but in a slightly different order. And of course she goes beyond just talking about reasons behind writing. Here we meet Deborah as an adult on a trip to Mallorca. We don't really know what point she is at her life exactly, but we do get sense that things are a bit messy. And we learn this right from the very first few paragraphs. That spring, when life was very hard and I was at war with my lot and simply couldn't see where there was to get to, I seemed to cry most on escalators at train stations. Going down them was fine, but there was something about standing still and being carried upwards that did it. Escalators, which in the early days of their invention were known as traveling staircases or magic stairways, had mysteriously become danger zones. You can see now why I was hooked from page 1, and it's not just that. On page 2 she is referencing Gabriel Garcia Marquez's novel of Love and Other Demons, which I adore, and on top of that you quite early on get a sense of this signature humor that Levy pulls off in her, well, at least non-fiction books, because I haven't read her novels yet. I did read her short stories titled Black Vodka, and I'll definitely be reading her novels. But in these three books, there is this fantastic, very clever and very cunning sense of humor, which she also uses to explain why the title is Things I Don't Want to Know, and it actually comes from her travels to Poland in the 80s, where she was presented with a menu which her friend very kindly translated for her, and this menu had listed several dishes, but then in the middle one of the dishes was described as things you don't want to know. Me being Paul, I can just imagine that that dish was probably the stew that we make from pig skin, or the other stew made from pig's feet. One of the two. Both, by the way, my father's favorite dishes. So, in this book we move between three countries: Spain, South Africa and England. And the book starts with her going to Mallorca in Spain, but she takes with her her old writing journals. And through these journals, there's a lot of things weaved in from her childhood in South Africa, and then the book ends with her being a teenager in London because her family eventually emigrated from South Africa to London when she was, I think, about 8 or 10 years old. So this is definitely not a linear book. It's more about the emotional landscape as opposed to about events themselves. And so while she is describing her growing up in South Africa during the apartheid, it is here that through her childhood's eyes she peels back the ways the power, the language, the politics kind of intersect. There's also a very astute and interesting commentary on racism. Let me see if I can find the quote. The second clue was that the white children were secretly scared of the black children. They were scared because they threw stones and did other mean things to the black children. White people were afraid of black people because they had done bad things to them. And if you do not feel safe, you do not feel normal. There's also loads of cross references in this book to other artists. So for example, when she is in Mallorca, she reflects on George Sand, who spent some time in Mallorca with Frédéric Chopin. She was visiting the house where she lived, and George Sand lived. And she uses that to reflect on womanhood and on writing, also on motherhood. Another great quote for you. It was becoming clear to me that motherhood was an institution fathered by masculine consciousness. The male consciousness was male unconsciousness. It needed its female partners, who were also mothers, to stamp on her own desires and attend to his desires, and then to everyone else's desires. We had a go at cancelling our own desires and found we had a talent for it. This is what I mean. Levy's descriptions are so sharp. She doesn't preach, she doesn't over-explain anything. It's really down to you as a reader to take out of it as much or as little as you want. It's for you to sit there and reflect on how what she writes relates to your life. Now, in this second book, The Cost of Living, we meet Deborah a bit further along in life. She is now divorced. Her eldest daughter is at university. Her mother has recently died, so she is dealing with quite a lot. There is still that strong thread on womanhood, especially the cost women bear in maintaining the lives of others. But this book expands heavily also into grief and how messy grief is and how it can show up in these unexpected ways. There is this especially touching little moment when she goes to a Turkish shop, a Turkish news agent, to buy lollies that were the only lollies that her mom was able to eat, or maybe they were her favorite when her mother was already very sick with cancer. And that little moment, it's like this portal into Deborah Levy's grief. And again, there's also a bit of a humor in there as well. This book is full of observations. You can feel Deborah Levy almost like peeling back these layers of everyday life to reveal something else. And she is calling out on all these quiet, invisible expectations placed on us as human beings, and especially on women. In this second book, we start to see Deborah Levy carving out a space for her as an individual, as a writer, through talking about practical things like, for example, moving into her new flat. What she is really talking about is relearning how to be alone, or relearning how to write while shedding all these structures that have been instilled in us. Again, this is such an easy read. You fly through it, and yet it's so profound. There isn't really any spare word in these books, and you get so much of it. And finally, we have the third book, Real Estate. By the time we get to Real Estate, Deborah Levy's second daughter has already left for university, and this book is a bit of a meditation on a concept of home. This is why it's titled Real Estate. And by real estate, she means not just physical space, but also what it is to claim your space in the world as a woman, what it is to claim space in the world as a writer, as an artist who is aging but also constantly evolving. So she writes here about this whole real estate as a metaphor, and this metaphor of real estate is constantly reoccurring in this book because she talks a lot about this imagined house, about this dream life, the fantasy of freedom, the ambition, desire, legacy. She also uses real estate as a bit of a metaphor for language, which I love. There is one sentence, I don't remember exactly what it says, but she compares language to a building site, and that we always try to repair it. It's always going through some kind of reconstruction. We also have some absurd moments in here, some strange conversations. We have this very unique male best friend, which was written in such a brilliant way. I loved Deborah Levy's best male friend, and the way she described him in this really unapologetic way. This final book sometimes feels like a bit of a dream because, I guess, of that continuous reference to this imaginary house. And so the feeling that you get is that feeling of longing for something, longing for your place in the world. So why am I recommending these books for you to read? Well, first and foremost, it is because of Deborah Levy's writing. Her writing is poetic, but at the same time sharp. It's also very intelligent. It's funny, it's clever, it's layered, and she somehow manages to describe and combine in a very fluent way these two things, the everyday life and these heavy philosophical ideas, while at the same time she makes you, from time to time, laugh out loud. And also what she is a master of is this profound way of bringing her ideas a full circle. So you will read something and she will refer to something, and then 2 chapters later she will circle back to it in such a clever way. I do think she's one of the smartest writers out there at the moment. Let me just read you something from Real Estate in case I haven't convinced you yet. So she is describing this experience of being in a cafe in Berlin, and for whatever reason, something triggers her thinking about her relatives who died in Auschwitz. This Spanish cafe was not conjuring a Mediterranean mood at all. Despite the jars of anchovies in the fridge, my association with the shower was the gassing of my relatives in Auschwitz. A phrase came to mind: "Let sleeping dogs lie." I wrote it down in my journal. It was a strange phrase, meaning leave things as they are, do not interfere and make trouble. As far as I was concerned, the sleeping dogs had their eyes wide open. Isn't this just absolutely brilliant? And actually, sorry, I'm on the roll now. I meant to read you from The Cost of Living a few sentences in which, in an indirect way, she is describing this sort of transition in her life and how, I guess, she got to the point where she was divorced. Everything was calm, the sun was shining, I was swimming in the deep. And then when I surfaced 20 years later, I discovered there was a storm, a whirlpool, a blasting gale lifting the waves over my head. At first, I wasn't sure I'd make it back to the boat, and then I realized I didn't want to make it back to the boat. Chaos is supposed to be what we most fear, but what I have come to believe, it might be what we most want. So yes, writing is extraordinary. And then another reason is that these books really hit home. And this is when you know the writer writes from the heart, because then that book will speak to you. And Deborah Levy, in one of her interviews, she was talking about how there's no point to write about things you as a writer understand. So she writes about all these things that are more like questions. There are no conclusions here, there are no answers. Again, it's for you to sit there and ponder. And it works because, like I said, she writes right from the heart, and she has this very eloquent way of saying things that we all kind of on the back of our minds sometimes think, but would never be able to express it the way she does. And the third reason why I think you should read these books, I promise you these books will inspire you and spark a lot of curiosity. And that's because Levy several times in these books references other female writers, but not just writers, and because there is plenty of other artists referenced here, including sculptors and musicians, and I have made notes, and now I'm going to be tracking them down and learning more about them. We've got, just from the top of my head, Virginia Woolf. We've got also George Sand, like I mentioned. We've got Simone de Beauvoir. It's like Levy is creating here this lineage of women's thought and creativity, and she is inviting us to join in. Listen, summer is coming up, and during the summer we have a little bit more time. We have more time to sit and think about the books we are reading. And because these books are about transition or about reinvention and finding your voice, if you want to do a bit of a more deep thinking and do a bit of a more self-reflection, I think this would be a perfect read for the summer. I would absolutely love it if you could let me know in the comments if you've read any of these three books and whether you agree with my take on these three books. Presumably everyone's gonna have a bit of a different take, and I would love to hear what your thoughts were and what analysis you had, because this is definitely the most impressive non-fiction I have read in a while. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this type of content, please consider subscribing. I am fairly new to this whole YouTube business, and every single subscriber is very much appreciated. I post videos at least every Friday, and I will see you next week. Bye for now.